What are some real world examples that showcases the power of creativity in marketing?
Sure. So think about, I love this example of Salesforce. They're a multi-billion-dollar software company that, massively successful. Everyone knows them as an 800-pound gorilla today. But actually, at the time that they started, they were just less than a handful of people. They were a very scrappy startup. And so what did they do to grab attention? So the 800-pound gorilla at the time, Siebel Systems in the CRM space. And so Salesforce bought out all the taxis in the area in San Francisco when Siebel Systems was having their annual user conference. And so anyone who came to the airport looking to go to the Siebel Systems conference, well, they wound up in a taxi driven by Salesforce people. And so the Salesforce people gave them a pitch on Salesforce and why it was so important and why their software was so much better than the Siebel model. And then beyond that, at the users conference itself, Salesforce set up a mock demonstration where the crowd was demonstrating, they were protesting software. Enterprise software, right? And they were saying no software, and because Salesforce was all about being in the cloud, and that was very brand new at the time. And so the whole idea that you wouldn't download the software, that you wouldn't install it, that you wouldn't manage it yourself was brand new. And so Salesforce made a mockery of the whole thing, this mock protest, and they had a mock TV crew covering it. And so there was so much attention that was drawn to it that actual TV crews started showing up because they saw one TV crew. They didn't want to miss out on the news. And so they brought their own TV crew. So all of a sudden it was all over the news. And it was a massive success. And obviously Salesforce is massively successful. Now, that's a drastic case of creativity, but it doesn't, creativity can be anything. It doesn't have to be expensive. It doesn't have to be world changing. I'll give you an example. So at one of the companies that I was at, we had been targeting many different types of companies at many different industries. And we decided that our best customers were software companies. And software companies would deliver six-figure contracts, and they needed to renew over and over for the types of services that we provided, which was localization services for their software. And so what we decided to do one day was to literally fire 50% of our customers in one day.
Wow.
And then we decided we are only going to focus on software companies. That's the only thing we're going to market is solutions for software companies. And we're going to ditch all other marketing. And we wound up growing the company 250%. The company wound up being sold for a multiple of annual revenue. It was a massive success, but it was only because of having a backbone to be creative and do something very bold that others, that our competitors were not willing to do. For something at iProspect, where we went from 85 employees to over 700 within 5 years. So one of the things that we did was we looked around and we said, okay, well, how do we do our marketing? At the time, the vast majority of the marketing was at large conferences, right? Thousands of attendees at these conferences. We would have a booth, an exhibit booth, and we would spend literally $40,000, $50,000 at each of these conferences, sending a whole team, having the booth, flying everyone out there, flying all the equipment out there. And so myself and a colleague said, well, what if instead of, and I should say, before I explain, so one of the challenges with doing this, right? It might sound fantastic, going to a conference with thousands of prospects and spending, having the whole team there. The problem was our competitors were right next to us. So we would have a booth, but guess what? There were 30 other competitors who would have a booth too. And it was very easy for someone to have a conversation with us, but then to have 29 other conversations with competitors. And so, we were spending a ton of money, a ton of effort, a ton of resources, only to have someone talk to 29 of our competitors and hardly remember us. We might have had a great conversation, but they might have had a few other great conversations as well, right? And so just the entire environment was not set up for us to break through, right? And so we said, well, would be the environment that would be completely different from that, where it could still connect with our best clients, but instead of, thousands of attendees, what if we, and 2-minute conversations, right? What if we could have 2-hour conversations with our best prospects and no competitors? And we thought, well, how could we do that? Because that would be the ideal. That would solve all of these challenges of trade shows and conferences and seminars. And we said, you know what? We're going to host our own events. They're going to be local events. So we rented out space at the House of Blues in a back room. So we made it really fun, right? And tons of food, tons of alcohol. And we invited only who we wanted to attend.
Yeah.
And so we got our best prospects in the door. The first one, with lots of food and drinks. We had a special guest from Google come in and speak, and we had a fantastic time. Now, there were only 10 attendees, right? There were only 10 guests in the room with us, but we wound up talking with them for hours and hours, and it was fantastic. And out of that one night, we wound up with a multi-million-dollar contract, and we wound up with a 6-figure contract. And so we said, let's do this again. And at the second one, the same thing happened. We wound up with another multi-million-dollar contract. So we were like, wow, this is amazing. This is completely different than going to these large shows and competing with, 29 other competitors. And so we wound up doing these very small, intimate events with only those who we invited. And it wound up changing everything. And that was a huge driver for our growth. It became the #1 leads driver for the company and driving us from 85 to over 700 employees within 5 years. It was a rocket ship of growth, but it took lateral thinking. It took thinking about something that none of our competitors were thinking of at the time.